Welcome to another edition of The Explainer. Today we're unpacking a massive, overarching theme, friction. You know, whenever massive systems interact, whether it's everyday citizens rubbing up against the state, government clashing with industry policy, or a nation trying to secure its borders, sparks are absolutely bound to fly. In this explainer, we're going to dig into the raw data and the core arguments behind three dominating news stories to figure out exactly why these sparks are flying.
Okay, let's dive into this. We've structured today's explainer in 3 acts. First, we'll look at the youth protests at Jantar Mantar. Then, we'll tackle the highly debated E20 fuel rollout. And finally, we'll examine the escalating conflict in Balochistan.
So, Act 1, Friction at Home, the Jantar Mantar youth protests.
Right now, smack in the heart of Delhi, we're witnessing a very raw, very human element of friction. It's a direct confrontation between the state's sprawling education system and the youth whose entire futures depend on it. And to really grasp the gravity of this movement, you have to understand the physical toll it's taking. What kicked off as a peaceful gathering has escalated dramatically. By day 8, a hunger strike was initiated. And now, pushing past day 15, students and activists are just trying to survive under extreme heat. We're talking temperatures soaring well past 40 degrees Celsius. There are no air conditioners out there, no coolers. It's literally just young people sitting on the ground under basic tarpaulins, enduring absolutely brutal conditions to demand systemic accountability.
So what actually triggered this incredible level of endurance? Well, the core grievances are rooted in massive, widely reported failures within the examination system. Protesters are pointing directly to widespread leaks of the NEET and CBSE exam papers. And adding even more fuel to the fire are these astonishing reports out of Madhya Pradesh Rajiv Gandhi Technical University, where question papers were literally stolen right before the exams. So in response to all this, which protesters argue has totally jeopardized the futures of millions of students, they are explicitly demanding the resignation of Education Minister Dharmendra Pradhan, alongside calls for top-to-bottom structural reform.
What's really fascinating here is the emotional strategy of the movement. Leaders like climate activist Sonam Wangchuk and youth organizer Abhishek Dipke are making these incredibly direct, impassioned appeals to families. Just listen to this quote from Dipke. "I request all mothers to come here for one day. We are fighting for your kids' future." They are actively framing this not just as a student issue, but as a full-blown crisis that threatens every household in the country. They're hoping to draw parents off the sidelines by making it crystal clear that a failure in this system affects every single family. That being said, the situation on the ground is super precarious. On one hand, the movement is gaining massive backing from farmer unions like the Samyukt Kisan Morcha, military veterans, and representatives from multiple political parties. But at the exact same time, these protesters are operating under the constant, looming fear of a sudden police crackdown. Leaders have been publicly expressing anxiety that authorities might just forcibly evict them from the site at any moment, which has created a highly tense standoff.
Let's move to Act 2 and see how this friction builds in the policy world, the E20 ethanol debate.
First things first, what exactly is E20? Basically, it's an automotive fuel blend made up of 20% ethanol and 80% petrol. But what's absolutely vital to understand here is its combustion profile. It possesses a very high octane rating. We're talking somewhere between 109 to 111. Now, traditionally, a fuel with this specific rating is utilized in high-performance racing cars. So as you might guess, if you try to pump this into your everyday family sedan without proper preparation, you've got a massive compatibility issue on your hands.
So the crucial point is, you just can't run racing-grade fuel through an older standard engine without facing some consequences. Automotive experts note that older engines actually require complex, highly specific mechanical adjustments to safely burn E20. We're talking about modifications like completely remapping the engine control unit, physically changing the air-fuel ratio, carefully calibrating the engine for cold starts, and adjusting the ignition timing. It is a heavy technical lift, and for everyday drivers, that means potential headaches and real out-of-pocket costs just to make their existing engines compatible. And that brings us to the core friction point, the timeline. SIAM, which is the Society of Indian Automobile Manufacturers, strongly advised a gradual, step-by-step rollout targeting the year 2030. That would give the industry and consumers plenty of time to adapt. But the government decided to launch an accelerated rollout starting in 2023. This rapid timeline is sparking intense debate, particularly regarding the massive dilemma it creates for consumers who purchased their vehicles before 2023, whose engines simply weren't built for E20.
And of course, that accelerated timeline leads to some pressing questions from industry observers. Automotive experts are raising serious concerns over a profound lack of transparency regarding the initial testing. Specifically, the Automotive Research Association of India, or ARAI, conducted E20 engine tests back in 2020. Yet they strictly refused to disclose which cars were tested or even where the E20 fuel was sourced from, claiming all that data is completely confidential. As you can imagine, this secrecy is heavily fueling public skepticism.
To put India's ambitious policy into a global perspective, let's look at a pretty surprising fact. The European Union, which we all know is heavily regulated and highly focused on green energy, currently only supplies E5 and E10 ethanol blends to its consumers. The fact that the EU caps ethanol at 10% really underscores the aggressiveness of India's push straight to a 20% blend and highlights exactly why this policy is generating such friction.
Okay, zooming out for Act 3, friction at the borders, the escalating conflict in Balochistan.
To really grasp the scale of what's happening geopolitically, you have to look at this number, $62 billion. That is the estimated value of the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, or CPEC. It is a staggering amount of infrastructure investment, and it runs directly through the highly volatile region of Balochistan, making it a prime, high-value target.
And those high stakes have unfortunately resulted in severe violence. Reports indicate a devastating recent Fedayeen attack by the Baloch Liberation Army, or BLA. The militants targeted a Coast Guard camp in Jiwani, which is located critically close to the strategic Gwadar port, essentially the crown jewel of the entire CPEC project. While official numbers are often heavily disputed, sources claim over 30 Pakistani soldiers were killed in the assault, with some reports suggesting up to 84 casualties, including the wounded.
Now, what's really interesting here is understanding what's actually driving this violence. What is the BLA's campaign rooted in? While the insurgency stems from deep, long-standing grievances. Local Baloch populations allege that the Pakistani government is effectively selling out their natural resources to China. They point to forced land acquisitions and displacement to make way for all this CPEC infrastructure. Furthermore, there are widespread claims of severe military oppression against Baloch citizens. Ultimately, many locals perceive these multi-billion-dollar Chinese investments not as regional development, but rather as a literal death trap.
And this brilliantly illustrates the wider nightmare for the state, because the Balochistan issue doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's just one part of a massive, multi-front security crisis for Pakistan. Over in the west and south, you have the BLA targeting infrastructure and the military. In the east, there's the ongoing threat from the TTP and cross-border militancy from Afghanistan. Up north, there are citizen uprisings in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. According to the sources, the state has faced a staggering 10,000 terror attacks over the last 5 years alone.
Bringing it all together now. Analyzing these unresolved tensions between citizens, the state, and security. So, what does this all mean? When we look at the students in Delhi fighting the system, consumers fighting sudden policy shifts, and militants in Balochistan fighting the state, we are left with an incredibly difficult question to ponder. How can any state successfully manage the delicate balance between satisfying its domestic youth, navigating rapid policy shifts, and securing its borders from existential threats? There are absolutely no easy answers, but understanding these exact friction points is the crucial first step. Thanks for exploring this with me today, and I'll see you on the next explainer.